Hey College Success, welcome to week 12 of the semester. It's hard to believe we only have a few more weeks left to go. You might be getting spring fever already. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Quick plug, workshop assignment coming due in just a few weeks. So just make sure you get that completed. We're going to be in week 12, as I mentioned. If you haven't already done so, I do recommend going ahead and watching the chapter 10 lecture. Chapter 10 is what will be covered this week and what will be kind of the basis for understanding for your assignments. So let's hop in here. This is a quote-unquote normal week. You have a discussion forum. You need to post your original response by Wednesday for your weekly attendance, responded to classmates by Sunday. Complete your chapter 10 assignment, which is called Know Before You Owe, K-N-O-W, Know Before You Owe, and chapter 10 quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into these assignments. So for your discussion, chapter 10 is about finances and spending money and college expenses, all of those things that unfortunately we always have to think about unless we're very wealthy. So the discussion forum prompt is, how do you feel when you do not have enough money for something? Will you stop spending on some wants while you build up your emergency fund? So pretty straightforward post. So kind of thinking about budget or money and spending, and whenever you come up short for something, or maybe you're working hard to save for it, do you save up for things and build up your emergency fund? Do you put some things on hold? Maybe do you have like some expensive habits, like you have a coffee habit every day, it's $5 a coffee 5 times a week, it adds up very quickly, those kind of things. Or maybe you have a lot of streaming services, whatever it might be. How do you approach your finances? Obviously, without getting too personal, too many details. Talk about how do you feel when you don't have money that you need, whether it's a small purchase or a larger purchase, and how do you kind of navigate those wants versus needs and building up emergency fund. So again, post that by Wednesday for your week 12 attendance and respond to classmates by Sunday. All right, the Know Before You Owe assignment, you're going to open this up. It's going to be one of these PDFs that you can click into, and this is going to kind of just help you understand a little bit, if you don't already, the process of financial aid and kind of how this looks and how it works. To get this information, there's a little example up here, but I'm going to walk through a little bit with you as well. So to get the information you need, I'm just going to kind of go back to the regular page here. You're going to go to the Stark State homepage underneath Paying for College, and I'm just going to have you go to the tuition and fees. I do talk about in the lecture video for this week these other areas, financially, like scholarships more particular, but for this purpose of this assignment, I'm just going to go to tuition and fees. And here is a nice breakdown effective in the fall of how much, if you are an in-state resident, each credit hour costs all the way up through 16 or more. And then there are fees underneath it, like required fees that every student has. And then this is per student need. So depending on kind of what you're doing on campus, if you are online, if you're face-to-face, card replacement ID cards, those kind of things. And then program fees. So if you are in a specific program, what fees are associated with some of the classes you might be taking. All good information to know so that you know that your tuition is not just the tuition, there's other fees that go along with it. Okay, so for this assignment, I'm going to ask that you look to see how many credit hours, and this, even if you're CCP, so technically your college is covered, you're still doing this. So look to see how many credit hours maybe you're taking now, maybe how many you're taking in the summer or the fall. So kind of pick which one that you are taking. And so I am going to, for this purpose, just going to use the 6 credit hour. So I'm going to use this number right here, $1,197.60. I'm going to put it in here. That's where you're going to put. So let's say, you're taking 9 credits or you're taking 4 credits. That's whatever number credit. I'm not going to have you worry about all of these fees down here because it might not apply to you, or it's just something that I'm not going to have you have to do all this math for it. So keep your base right there. Underneath it, it's room and board. Well, we're not a residential campus, but if you have some extra expenses built in, maybe every semester you're going to have to spend, $300 on gas, or you're also going to have to buy a laptop, anything school related, you can plug that in right here. And you would do the same over here. Okay, so I am just, for my purpose right now, I'm going to put 0, but I want you to think about your needs. What do you have that is going to also be a cost for you as it relates to school? Even if you're not living on campus, you're still driving to campus, you're still using materials, things like that. And then your expense total. So again, I'm just keeping it simple for, and I don't know why it's so tiny there. I'm keeping it simple for demonstration purposes. Underneath here, now this is where it's going to vary a little bit. And you can see with the examples up here, you're going to give one student more than they need and one student less than they need. So let's say I get, with this, $2,500 in scholarship or loans or whatever it might be. And then over here, this student gets $1,000. So hopefully you're still following me here. You're going to give this student more than they need, this student less than they need. And so then you're going to get the difference. So in each case, you're going to subtract. So in this first column, I get a negative number. In this second column, I get a positive number. In actuality, that means this person is owed money. This person owes money. So this person is getting a refund of that amount. This person is having to owe that amount. So that's the first step. You're going to fill out this form, but I want you to use it with your own example. And then the amount of scholarship, it's kind of arbitrary in terms of it doesn't have to be what you received. You just make sure this one gets more and this one gets less. Now, it says steps 2 and 3. We're going to kind of walk through these here. When you are done filling this out, there's no place to type down here. So I'm going to have you save it with your changes, and you're going to upload it in here. So you're going to upload the file, but I don't want you to forget in the Create Submission area to answer question 3. Question 3 says, what should student with excess aid, right here, do with their refund check? List 2 ways to use the money wisely. So maybe they turn around and use it for books. They pay off their loan a little bit more. They get ahead on their payments. They save it for gas. Whatever the case is, what should they do for that excess aid? What would be a smart way to spend that money? And then the student who owes money, what should they do to cover the difference? List 4 ways to pay their balance and rank them from most desirable to least desirable. You know, should they take out more loans? Should they borrow money from a friend? Should they get an additional job? Whatever it might be. Again, this is all talking about the concept of like financial aid, so that we are something again we have to think about as college students. So upload your file and then answer those questions in this Create Submission area. Once you've done both, you've uploaded the file and you've answered that question, go ahead and hit submit. All right, and that is called Know Before You Owe. Finally, you're taking your Chapter 10 vocabulary quiz. You're going to open this up, and it's going to be Microsoft Word doc as normal. Just a reminder, 2 to 5 sentences. Please respond to every question. I am having students, I know we're further in the semester, so we're kind of our motivation and our energy is draining, but I'm having students only answering like in 1 sentence or not all parts. All right, question 1, if you realize your expenses were greater than your income, what could you do to balance your budget? So what kind of steps would you take, or would you do some kind of budget analysis? Question 2, deciding on which bank or credit union to use and selecting the type of account is important. What do you think you should consider when making these decisions? How would you evaluate which option? So basically, how would you go about deciding if you should use a bank or a credit union? And you might talk about, it depends. Are you just doing a checking account? Are you doing a loan? So talk about the decision-making process between those 2 options. Question 3, this is a scenario that if someone is being asked, or Mari is being asked to lead a discussion about financial literacy, specifically focusing on credit cards, what should be included in her talk? Pros, cons, tips, information. Question 4, Danny was just hired to work in the bookstore. It's her first job and she has extra money, but she has a goal to buy a new laptop. Use the financial planning process to help Danny create a plan for purchasing a laptop. Remember to include all 5 steps. So this is where it's really important to make sure that you have spent time in the textbook or the video or the slides, whatever it might be, and know the financial planning process. So we'll go in here, and you really want to make sure that you look through those 5 steps right here. Goals, alternatives, financial plan, implement, monitor, and adjust. So pay attention to those. It's asking you to address all 5 steps. So you're really walking through the 5-step process with this goal in mind. And then finally, question 5, compare and contrast grants, loans, and work study. How are they, what do they have in common? How are they different? And then which one do you think is best and why? And that is your Chapter 10 quiz. So again, just a real quick recap for this week. You are posting your original response and your Chapter 10 discussion by Wednesday. Responded to classmates by Sunday. Chapter 10 assignment, know before you owe, and Chapter 10 quiz. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great week.